me, elves and men! To me, O my kinsfolk! He cried, and his voice shook like a horn in the valley. Down, heedless of order, rushed all the dwarves of Dane to his help. Down, too, came many of the lake-men, for Bard could not restrain them. And out upon the other side came many of the spearmen of the elves. Once again the goblins were stricken in the valley, and they were piled in heaps till Dale was dark and hideous with their corpses. The wargs were scattered, and Thorn drove right against the bodyguard of Bolg, but he could not pierce their ranks. Already behind him among the goblin dead lay many men and many dwarves, and many a fair elf that should have lived yet long ages merrily in the wood. And as the valley widened, his onset grew ever slower. His numbers were too few. His ranks were unguarded. Soon the attackers were attacked, and they were forced into a great ring, facing every way, hemmed all out with goblins and wolves returning to the assault. The bodyguard of Bolg came howling against them, and drove in upon their ranks like waves upon cliffs of sand. Their friends could not help them, for the assault from the mountain was renewed with redoubled force, and upon either side men and elves were being slowly beaten down. On all this, Bilbo looked with misery. He had taken his stand on Ravenhill among the elves, partly because there was more chance of escape from that point, and partly, with the more tookish part of his mind, because he was going to be in a last desperate stand. He preferred, on the whole, to defend the elven king. Gandalf, too, I may say, was there, sitting on the ground as if in deep thought, preparing, I suppose, some last blast of magic before the end. That did not seem far off.
It will not be long now, thought Bilbo, before the goblins win the gate, and we are all slaughtered or driven down and captured. Really, there's enough to make one weep. After all, one has gone through. I would rather old Smog had been left with all the wretched treasure, than that these vile creatures should get it, and poor old Bomber and Balin and Filly and Killy, and all the rest come to a bad end, and Bard too, and the lakemen and the merry elves. Misery me! I have heard songs of many battles, and I have always understood that defeat may be glorious. It seems very uncomfortable, not to say distressing. I wish I was well out of it. The clouds were torn by the wind, and a red sunset slashed the west. Seeing the sun gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked around. He gave a great cry. He had seen a sight that made his heart leap. Dark shapes, small yet majestic against the distant glow. "The eagles! The eagles!" he shouted. "The eagles are coming!" Bilbo's eyes were seldom wrong. The eagles were coming down the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have gathered from all the eyries of the north. "The eagles! The eagles!" Bilbo cried, dancing and waving his arms. If the elves could not see him, they could hear him. Soon they too took up the cry, and it echoed across the valley. Many wandering eyes looked up, though as yet nothing could be seen except from the southern shoulders of the mountain. "The eagles!" cried Bilbo once more, but at that moment a stone, hurtling from above, smote heavily on his helm, and he fell with a crash and knew no more.